Good morning, everyone. Yes, good morning. Thank you very much for turning up. Such a large number after the rainy night. My name is Barkat Charania. Barkat. I'm a trainee or intern master gardener. We joined 22 of us in August last year, that is 7-8 months ago, and we will be certified sometime next month. So intern or trainee or in making master gardener, or to be born, I suppose, next month. Anyway, I think you're very lucky, all of you, that you've got a hobby of staying with nature, gardening, and it's not easy, but I suppose in the fast-paced materialistic life, this is important. Anyway, let's get to the work. For those who are new here, here's the explanation. Texas A&M AgriLife Extension provides research-based education program and outreach services to Texas communities through county offices. Boone Holiday, who is amongst us here, is our Fort Bend County Extension agent with extensive education and field experience. He guides the volunteer master gardeners like us in promoting conservation and sustainable horticultural practices to help residents succeed in creating and maintaining home gardens and landscapes. Today, this is our lecture number 3 out of 6 in-person lecture, which we also have 8 lectures virtual, and I think you may have got the bookmarks which lists all of them, and I'll request you to kindly register yourself so that you do not miss any of them. These lectures are recorded online and is available, and we will send you the link on that. With regards to the questions after Larry's lecture, please hold on the lectures or hold on your questions, write it down, and you will have the question answer session at the end. We have on the left there, through the door, the restrooms and the water fountain. We have several demonstration gardens, not very far from here. It's probably walking distance, but you can take your car. Otherwise, you'll have to walk back if you're visiting them. Those gardens are really worth looking at. I think you must, if not today, sometime again, come here. There are several gardens, and I'll just name them. I think herb and vegetable gardens, butterfly garden, native plant garden, Texas superstar garden, and shade garden, and many other things. They are very well labeled with common names and the botanical names. So I think it's really very interesting and very impressive, I would say. It's maintained by the Fort Bend Master Gardeners, which are all volunteers, and they have to give about 50 hours of work every year to maintain the certification. And as I said, it takes almost 9 months to be a master gardener and then maintain the certificate as well. Several master gardeners are present here. I would say veterans. Some of them will be available there to explain the demonstration gardens. So visit there, and you will probably really invest some time that you will invest will be worth doing that. Without further ado, let me introduce our instructor, Larry Blazing. Larry grew up on a family farm in Indiana. He has a BS in mechanical engineering from Purdue and an MS from MIT. Larry worked for 40 years in Schlumberger as an engineer and a manager. He retired in 2015. Larry and his wife Kathy are both certified organic gardeners from Urban Harvest. Larry took the Fort Bend Master Gardener training in 2018 and works the hotline, as we call it, or help desk for the Fort Bend residents. Larry and Kathy enjoy dancing and traveling, especially on cruises. Larry has been an avid vegetable gardener and gladly shares his surplus with neighbors and the food pantry. Then he has 3 grandchildren and loves the fish in his backyard lake with his grandchildren. Now let me turn this over to Larry. Here is Larry.
Can you hear me in the back? Nope. Okay. Sorry. Can you hear me now? Okay. Can you hear me now? Can't hear you. Is that one on?
Yeah, turn that one on.
No, this one.
Is it on?
Testing. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? How about that? Can you hear me in the back?
Yes.
Oh, that's a good shot. It's okay. I want to thank my wife Kathy, who's in the front row there, for all of her support and understanding. So, other people, and I want to thank Angela. She did all the videography here. I apologize. There was some wind noise, so there are some issues with wind noise, but I can't help that. And I want to thank Boone and Peg and Jennifer. I used some of their slides too. As you heard, please hold your questions to the end. That way we'll get done on time. Mute your cell phones if you would. The slide number is at the top of the slide in case you have any questions I didn't understand slide number 2. And it's okay and encouraged to take pictures of the slides. If there's something up there you want, click it. Few definitions. Nematodes. If I say the word nematodes, that means root knot nematodes. They're microscopic worms that eat roots, and they cause galls or little round spots on your roots, particularly on tomatoes and okra and cucumbers. The fruit is still fine to eat. I have nematodes and I eat all the fruit, and there is no problem whatsoever with the fruit. It is a microscopic worm that's in the soil everywhere. I have issues with nematodes. You probably don't. I have sandy soil, that's why. And you probably have clay soil. FBMG, Fort Bend Master Gardeners, TAMU, Texas A&M. Fallow means no crop is harvested. The goal of going fallow with your garden is to allow the land to recover and disrupt the life cycles of pathogens, diseases, and insects, basically by removing the host. So you have nothing growing there, they have nothing to eat. Cover crops are plants that increase organic matter and smother weeds. So sometimes they're called smother crops, but typically we don't harvest them, except for one exception that you'll know about at the end of this. These are the links from the presentation. Brandy's going to send those out, so there's no need to copy any of those. But if you want to snap them, why, feel free. And what we're going to talk about
One more time.
okay? So that, if you want to know about the planting calendar, cucumbers, okra, squash vine borers, I don't know what's going on. It doesn't like the corner. I'm too far. I got beyond the range. Okay, I'm gonna have to try this side now. Whatever you want to know about that's in there, hopefully the link is here. If not, send us a note on the hotline. What we're covering today, gardening considerations, varieties, what to plant, seasonality, when to plant it, the vegetables to plant in warm weather. That's basically the body of this presentation. Then we'll talk about herbs, containers, pest control, a few tips on tomatoes, drip irrigation, crop rotation, cover crops, succession planting, books and resources, and then finally you can go to the demonstration garden and you can ask questions. You can see here, this is how I harvest okra, by bending it over, because it gets to be 7-8 feet tall. And this is okra, that's suyo cucumbers, and tatumi squash, which you will know about at the end of this presentation. This is what my wife calls the eggplant tree. That is a lot of eggplants. So we give a lot to the local food pantry. Considerations. Who's going to do the work? How many people get to enjoy your produce? What do you like to eat? As you can see, I like tomatoes, cucumbers, eggplants, and squash. How much space do you have? I have a very tiny garden. My garden is 5 feet by 10 feet, 50 square feet. I have 3 of those, and I do a strict rotation. So I have only 1 with tomatoes, theoretically. You'll hear more about that later. You got to prepare your soil, fertilize it. You need a well-drained area. Nothing likes wet feet, as we say. You can either do rows, heap up in rows, or you can have a raised bed. You want it to be near a water supply because you don't want to be lugging 5-gallon pails of water around. It needs to be easily accessible. The best thing for your garden is your shadow out there every day, and that'll take care of most problems. Away from trees, you don't want the poor garden to have to compete with trees for nutrients. You need at least 6 hours of sunlight daily. You have to control the weeds, diseases, and insects. Plant the recommended varieties at the right time, and hopefully you'll have success. Comes to varieties, you have 2 excellent choices. This is the A&M. This is Fort Bend Master Gardeners. This is our list of recommended varieties. This is the online A&M linked thing. So you enter your county, Fort Bend County, and if you don't enter any vegetable in there, it'll give you all of them, all the recommended vegetables for Fort Bend County. This is my garden this week. As you can see, my tomatoes are about this tall. Seasonality. Some things like cool, some things like it's hot. This is a plot of the soil temperatures for germination here. So cool season or cold crops are like lettuce and radishes. They like 45 degrees for germination, at least 45 degrees. They don't like to grow when it's hot. Matter of fact, if you try to grow them when it's hot, they'll bolt. They'll go to flower, and then the fruit usually does, or the lettuce doesn't taste any good after that, or broccoli, whatever you're growing. Then you have spring transition kind of things like corn and tomatoes, which are like 55 degrees soil temperature. And now what we're talking about is hot, warm weather things like eggplant, okra, watermelon, beans, and squash. They like the soil temperature to be at least 75 degrees, some of them. And they're mostly tropical in nature. And they also, this is germination, but they also like to grow in warm temperatures. I planted okra when it was warm a few weeks ago, and I haven't seen anything come up yet. So I pushed it. I always push it, but that's okay. I'll replant. This is your Bible. You have a copy right there for as far as planting goes. It is what you should refer to when you decide, okay, what am I going to plant? It's online. You can see the link right here. This assumes that everything is seeds unless it's otherwise noted. Here, if you see the word plants, such as broccoli plants, tomato plants. Okay, that means you can grow a plant, but you can't grow from seed at that time. So you got to respect this. This is based on years of experience. And if you come down here at the middle of April, the first thing you see is cantaloupe. Okay, we're going to talk about cantaloupe. The second thing you see is cucumbers. We're going to talk about cucumbers. And all of these things we're going to talk about. One thing interesting, onions. You come down here at onions, you're going to see multipliers. Multipliers. Hey, wait a minute, I can't plant multipliers until October. Why is Larry talking about them? Well, if you can get multiplying onion sets from a friend or somebody who has them, is growing them, who's growing multiplying onions? Okay, we got 2 people there. Okay, pay attention to them. If you can get a few, like 2 or 3, you will have more green onions than you could ever want to devour. I give them to the food pantry. And you can plant them now. You don't have to wait until you would with seed. Okay, so that's why we're going to talk about multiplying onions today. This is a great reference. It's called the Easy Gardening Series. If you have a problem with your okra, your tomatoes, or if you want to see something about herbs for Texas, this is the link you go to. Easy Gardening, CAMU, C-A-M-U, Easy Gardening Series. And watermelons are over here, which you'll see that pop up later. First, another definition. Hybrid versus open pollinated. Hybrids, when you buy tomatoes, if you buy a celebrity tomato, how many people have tomatoes out now? Okay. How many people have celebrities? Why not? Everybody should be planting one celebrity at least, unless you're growing heirlooms. If you're growing heirlooms, that's fine. But hybrid tomatoes, in particular, celebrities are kind of the baseline tomato that everything is compared against because it always does so well. But if you have a hybrid, you grow a hybrid because it has hybrid vigor. It's stronger growth, higher yields, better survival, adaptability to stress, more uniform. Disease resistance is incredible with hybrids because they're selected. They select the parents, and so they do controlled cross-pollination between 2 parents to give you a uniformly hybrid type of tomato. So celebrity would be a good example there. You cannot save, you can save the seed, but you don't know what you're going to get. So with a hybrid, don't save the seed, not worth it. If a volunteer pops up in your garden next year and you planted hybrids, rip it out. I know it's tough, but I do it. So you only need to nurse that through one summer and end up with no tomatoes or poor tomatoes, and then you'll say, okay, no more volunteers for me. Open pollinated, OP. You can save OP only if you grow only one variety. So if you grow Z-Best okra, and that's your only okra, and your neighbor's only okra, you can save the seed. Probably come out true. It's stable traits from one generation to the other. Examples, here's a few examples, Brandywine and so forth, everybody's heard of that. Heirlooms are OP that are over 50 years old. So they've been around a while or they have a history. Warm season, this is what we're going to talk about today. Well, let's get started. Okra. First of all, Boone is the one that's going to present this. He was at Pam's garden. This is in August of 2020. And Boone is our county extension agent. And so he's...
Pam's okra bed. And I asked Pam here if she was providing okra for the U.S. military. And she giggled. But seriously, we've got enough space here. We've planted enough okra to feed a whole community of people. So this is definitely something to be careful about when we're thinking about planting okra, is to plant what you need and what you're actually going to eat at home. what I tend to tell people is that 1 to 2 plants will feed one person in the household. Okay? 1 to 2 plants will feed one person in the household. Okay? So what that means is that I'm going out here in the summertime every day. You have to harvest it, or else you're going to miss it and it's going to get too big. What do you mean too big? Too big means that if I come out and the pod is this size right here, I'm going to squeeze these ribs. If I squeeze this and it feels like wood, it's hard, and it doesn't budge, this pod is too far gone. I'm not going to be able to cook this down in the kitchen to something that we can eat. This pod's going to need to just be removed from here and discarded in the compost pile or elsewhere. Thing to look for here, when I go out, we've got a full generation on this. I've got a full-size pod, I've got a young tender pod, and I've got some small ones here that are just getting started, okay? And so, every day. This one here, if I squeeze it, it's still squishy. It's a little too big for my taste. I like them more succulent, but you can still harvest this one and eat it. This one right here, it's about 2 inches long, 3 inches long, real succulent, real squishy. This is the prime time pick for me, personally. What this means here is that I've got to harvest this one today, and by tomorrow, this one right here, this little bitty nudge, is probably going to be about as big as this fingerling one here, and be ready to harvest.
So, few varieties. Clemson Spineless is very popular. They're the big fat ones. Z-Best is what I grow. This is they're long and skinny, and they're good to about 5-6 inches long. If you want red, you can try Burgundy. You need to plant them between April and July, as soon as it warms up, basically. Thin them to about 1 foot apart. Believe it or not, they'll go 7 feet tall, but 1 foot apart is pretty good. I plant 3 plants per person because I love okra. Pick it daily. Use gloves and long sleeves to harvest. Do as I say, not as I do. But you can see I do have clippers there. Sometimes you can snap them off, but sometimes when you snap them off, it just rips the plant. So it's best to always use pruning shears when you're harvesting. Remember, they're called ladyfingers, so they should harvest them when they're about ladyfinger size, especially if you have Clemson Spineless. When you have aphids, upspray. Now, you don't know what that means yet, maybe, but by the end of this presentation, you will. And 50 to 60 days between seed and your first okra, but they will produce until November. So if you take care of that okra, it'll reward you. Sweet potatoes. You can either buy slips or you can grow your own. So this is a very famous science project with the kids. Kids love them. You can grow slips. Beauregard's usually what you're going to get from the grocery. It's 90 days. Centennial, Jewel, Varden is 3 other varieties. Jewel is actually supposed to be nematode resistant, but I don't find that it's really very. Don't irrigate 2 to 3 weeks before harvest. You might get some more rotting. Now, if it rains, but don't irrigate. They do surprisingly have tender skin, so you want to fork dig them. So if you have a digging fork, you want to dig and fork with them. Don't ever slice them with a shovel. And then there's a specific curing you want to do. Look it up on the net or call us on the hotline, and we can help you with that curing cycle. You want to harvest just before or just after the first frost. And if you pile them up in hills, you'll get bigger and maybe more sweet potatoes. They take up a lot of room, so that vine is you're gonna have to let it run someplace. Eggplant. I'm partial to the Japanese eggplant. So these are the Japanese long, skinny eggplants for 2 reasons. One is because fresh eggplants, especially Asian eggplants, tend not to be as bitter as supermarket. If you've ever had a supermarket eggplant, Sometimes you gotta salt it to take the bitterness out or take the peel off. So with the Japanese, you don't have that problem. Unfortunately, you can't stuff them as well as you can stuff these, but they're highly conductive, and I like pink tongue, and you can find Ichiban Japanese eggplant anywhere. They produce until November, again, if you take care of them. That means basically upspray for spider mites. Sometimes I have to upspray like every other day for spider mites, and that will help it survive until November. You want to trellis them, you can't see, but there's cages under here. This is not supported by its own weight. It's got cages and poles. It's probably got to be at least 3 poles. Watermelon, should I just get rid of it? See if you can hear me. Sorry. Can you hear me in the back?
Yes.
All right, let's try that. Get rid of these modern inconveniences, huh? So, watermelon. Sandy soil came from the Middle East. So, you want well-drained sandy soil. Bee pollination is critical. It takes 15 visits for that poor little bee to pollinate that flower. More leaves, better fruit. It takes 5 feet in every direction for one plant, at least, depending on size of the plant. Keep the fruit off the soil, and you'll see that in the next slide a little bit. You want to harvest it when the bottom is yellow, and the closest tendril here turns completely brown. Gotta watch for varmints. They like them as much as we do, and they'll wait till they're nice and sweet. That's the problem with the big ones. The big ones take 90 days. The little ones are 75 days, sugar baby, which you see here. 75 days, and with 75 days, you got 15 days less for the bugs and the disease and every other problem you might have. The seedless takes more care and it's less productive. We do recommend a 4 to 5 year crop rotation, so you'll know more about crop rotation later on, but because of diseases. For watermelons, if you got a problem, go on to this website, the Aggie Horticulture website, and you can look up your problem and that'll help. Muskmelon, or we sometimes call it cantaloupe, they love sandy loam soils. You want to trellis them, and this is how you keep that fruit off the ground with a sling if you do trellis them. They ripen all at once, but you want to plant them sequentially. If you plant them sequentially, then you'll have a harvest. Even after the first one goes, you'll have a second harvest on the second plant. You want to mulch them before they vine. Rain before the harvest dilutes the flavor. That happened to me one year. It's like, what happened to my cantaloupe? Well, it rained before I harvested. Watch out for ants and pill bugs. You need to control your ants. Muskmelon is ripe when the stem easily slips from the fruit. You can see that right here where the stem is easily slipped from the fruit. Ambrosia is good variety, that's what I grew. Honeydew is ripe when the color changes and it's softer at the ends. Pumpkins. If you want Halloween pumpkins, you plant them in mid-June. You have your choice of large, medium, or small. They're about 110 days. Cucumbers. Again, I favor the Chinese, burpless, non-bitter, Suyo long cucumbers. They're 60 days, 16 inches long, so they're pretty long. You can actually plant these up until May when the picklers and the slicers. So you see, here's the varieties of slicers and picklers. Picklers tend to be small, 3 to 4 inches. These, you can plant them almost in the summer. So you're sequential planting again every 6 weeks, because the harvest for cucumbers lasts about 6 weeks. When you stop getting fruit from anything, tomatoes, cucumbers, whatever, when that stops producing, rip it out. Because if it's not giving you fruit, it is giving insects and diseases a home. And you don't want to encourage that. In particular, when you rip it out, look at the roots. That'll tell you something too. You want to cage or trellis these, keep them off the ground. You want to seal them in the refrigerator, especially these Chinese ones. We can't wax them like they do in the store. But these long, skinny ones will dry out because they have so much surface area. So if you put them in a Ziploc or wrap them up in saran wrap or something to keep them from going dehydrating, because when they dehydrate, they become limp. Nobody likes cucumbers, they're just not appealing anymore. They do have spikes. These Suyo have spikes. You can see that here. But they rub off easily. I always rub the spikes off before I give them to my neighbor so they don't even know they have spikes. And the peels are edible. So don't worry about peeling them. You don't have to peel them. You do want to wear long sleeves and pruning shears. I do a long sleeve when I'm in the cucumbers. If you've ever canned, you know how much work it is. Look up refrigerator pickles. That's at America's Test Kitchen. That is the link there. And basically all you do is save your juice from all the pickles you like and keep it in the refrigerator or the freezer. I put mine in the freezer. And then when you get lots of cucumbers, you throw them in that jar. Actually, you boil the juice, and then you put it together, put it in the refrigerator, and you got pickles for a long time. So anyway, look it up at America's Test Kitchen. Pepper plants. If you're like me and you love those big, sweet bell peppers you get in the grocery store with the thick walls and you want to grow those like I did, move to California. If you can grow those here, let me know. I would be very interested. Come up after and when we're over in the gardens and let me know if you've been successful. I can grow these. These are gypsy peppers. And they're good, but they're not as sweet and they're not as big and they're not as thick-walled as those ones you get in the grocery store. And then we can really do well with mild and hot peppers here. These Tam Mild, I grew one plant last year, and you know they're small, about that big, but they're mighty. My wife disagrees with the word mild there. It may say Tam Mild, but they're small. I put one or two of those in my morning omelet, and I'm ready for the day. One plant will suffice. You'll be able to fill your freezer with peppers. You do have to fertilize them, and they'll produce till fall. You take care of them, they'll produce till fall. That's a good thing about a lot of the things we're talking about here today is this stuff will carry over till fall. You do want to pick it early. If you see a small pepper like this one up here in the corner there, it's kind of small, pick it. Because if you pick the small peppers first and early in the season, that tells the plant, hey, produce more. And so pick the small peppers and you'll get a lot more big peppers. Squash, summer squash. We all love zucchini. How many people have been successful growing zucchini? Raise your hand. Okay. Usually you can grow zucchini 1 year if your neighbors have never grown it. 2 years if you're lucky. That third year, the vine borer is going to find you usually. So I don't even recommend growing zucchini. I wouldn't even try. My recommendation is Tatumi. My recommendation is Tatumi. Tatumi is what I call baseball squash, okay? And that's what it looks like. I planted it in the garden, and then I let it run across my lawn. You'll hear more about this later. And it'll get to be like 40 feet long by about 3 feet wide. And then you always get vine borers back here at the base where it started, back there. And what do? I cut it off, roll it up, throw it in the trash, and mow it. And so it's like it never even happened. But all the production is out here at the tip. If you see those red flags, I always hand pollinate because I can't find these underneath that dense foliage unless I put a red flag there. I put a red flag, then I can find them. The reason this survives with vine borer is it roots at every node. So you can see the roots going down. These are ones I ripped up. And you can see the roots go down at every node. And that's how it stays ahead of the vine borer. The vine borer still is a problem back at the base, but it stays ahead, and you still get enough to fill your freezer of squash. Taste, to me, I like it better than zucchini, but your mileage may vary. My videos, all of my videos recorded late April, well, last year. So, again, I apologize for the wind noise.
If you've been gardening in Houston for long, you've probably encountered the squash vine borer if you tried to grow zucchini. This is what I use to overcome the squash vine borer. This is called Tatumi squash. And I call it baseball zucchini because you harvest it when it's baseball size. You can actually let it get bigger, but the optimum taste is similar, very close to zucchini when it is baseball size. The way Tatumi overcomes the vine borer is by rooting at each node. So each node here will send down roots. With my small garden, I don't have enough room to let this run. So I let it run across my grass. And the main thing is I keep it about 3 feet wide, or a little less than 3 feet wide, and I let it run about 40 feet long, and it will give me all the squash I want. If you let it get wider than 3 feet, it'll kill the grass. So that's why I keep it at 3 feet, and I mow the sides. So I keep it controlled. It's a vine. You can control where it goes.
But what you can't do is trellis it. If you try to put it on a trellis, where's it going to root? So the vine borer gets it, kills it. So you cannot trellis the Tatumi. Vine borer. So this is what the adult vine borer looks like over here. It looks like a orange and black wasp. It's actually a moth. If you see this yellow frass at the base of your zucchini, basically that is this caterpillar's poop. And so if you see that, the caterpillar is actually inside the hollow zucchini stems. And so they use that as a highway. Try spraying them, okay? You can't get them. I have injected BT into the inside trying to overcome these, and that's why I now grow Tatumi. So, there are other more tolerant varieties. If you like these, you can try these. Scallops, acorns, crookneck, cushaw, butternut. So feel free, try whatever you like. I like Tatumi because it tastes like zucchini. Now, you can let Tatumi grow to winter squash. So it gets big just like all the other squash, and it gets yellow. But if you like any of these other varieties and they survive the vine borer, feel free. Southern peas have a lot of different names. Field, Crowder, cow peas. They produce for 4 to 5 weeks. We have 3 varieties we recommend here: Black Eye, Purple Hull, Zipper Cream. You'll hear more about this later. You'll see a video on this. You don't have to add nitrogen fertilizer. These can actually make their fertilizer. We'll talk more. It's actually a legume, and legumes will make their own fertilizer in a symbiotic relationship between the plant and the rhizobium bacteria. You may, if you have a new planting, need to inoculate your seed with rhizobium in order to fix nitrogen in your soil. So you can either use these on a trellis, or you can use them as a cover crop or a smother crop, as we say. You can harvest these either green as snaps, when you can either easily shell them, or you can wait for them to dry. You can use these as a cover crop. We'll hear more about cover crop later. Zipper cream is actually the best for nematodes, but iron and clay is the most popular southern pea for as a cover crop. They have powerful roots, so they can go down and crack a hard pan. Hard pan is if you till here, till here, till here, and you never get down there. That's your hard pan. So if you have a hard pan issue, it may be able to go down in there. And they also grow quickly, which is one thing we like with cover crops. Now, multiplying onions, like I said, if you find somebody who has them, if you get one, you plant it, you'll get 5. It is easy. No work whatsoever. You plant one. I plant them about yay deep. Do I water them when I plant them? Do I fertilize them? No. When everything else gets fertilized. But they are almost as trouble-free as you can. I did see a worm on one once, or a caterpillar on one. When they bunch, you harvest the bunch and plant one. They are actually offsets. They're called offsets. They never form a large bulb. I plant mine about 12 inches apart, and if you plant them closer together, you will. They'll be smaller. This is what they kind of look like. Green onions, basically. I use them as a border. You'll see that later, and that's a quote from Jay White, if you know him. Now we'll talk about herbs.
Now we're going to talk about herbs. We group herbs by moisture requirement. Here we have flat leaf, parsley, sweet basil, and Greek oregano. This makes a great chimichurri. I use irrigation hoses here, just like I use everywhere, because they're so flexible and because I hook them into my common system.
So, saw basil there. We grow Genovese basil, sweet basil. Also, Thai basil is another option. You want to prune it often before the seed buds form. You can actually harvest it until frost if it survives the summer. You can transplant it in May. May is coming up. And you want to plant mint in a separate container.
This way.
This is the Urban Harvest planting calendar, which actually includes herbs. So our planting calendar, which you had a copy of at the sign-in, does not include herbs, but the Urban Harvest does, and the link is on the bottom, and you should get them in your email under Urban Harvest Planter's Guide, and they have 4. We have 1 sheet, and they have 4 sheets because they have a lot of other stuff in theirs. So, if you want additional information on herbs, Angela is here. Where's Angela? There she is, waving her hand. See Angela with a hat? And so I asked Angela. Anita is out in the garden, I think, working on her herb garden. So if you want additional information, or you go into the Easy Gardening series and click on herbs. Now we'll talk about container gardening.
Now I'm going to talk to you about containers. We use containers for many reasons. One is portability. Say if you're in an apartment, you have a balcony. Another is because of soil conditions. I have blueberries in containers because they require a high acid. I have okra and cucumbers in containers because of nematodes. And I have tomatoes in containers because they're flexible. They give me the ability to, these containers will be moving to this garden next year. This is the back of the garden you saw previously. You have a choice in containers. What size would you like? This is 17 gallons, this is 9 gallons, and this one is 3 gallons. Depends on what you're going to grow. Texas A&M has a good reference for what size you need for what size of tomato. If you're growing a full-size tomato, you really want something pretty large, like a 17 gallon. or you are going to have to be watering twice a day maybe, if it's in a 5 or 9 gallon container. Watering is very important. How do you know when you need to water? You stick your finger in, and when you get about 1 inch deep, you know if it's moist, then you don't have to water. The other way is with a moisture meter.
So, you can calibrate your finger if you're not, don't trust your finger. With a moisture meter, you have dry, here, moist, and wet. You really don't want it to be wet, except after you just watered, and you don't really want to measure it after you just watered. So wait till the next day or 2 days later, and you'll get a feel for how moist it should be. Again, containers, I like them. I hate to have to water them. They're kind of a pain. They're heavy. Mine are very heavy. You size them for what production you want and how often you want to water. You must use a potting mix. You'll get better drainage and aeration with a potting mix. Don't use the soil from your garden. Use a potting mix. They also tend to be light, but they tend to dry out quickly. So if they dry out, you may have a problem because a lot of them are part of lot of peat moss, and peat moss is very hard to re-wet after it dries out. So try not to let your potting mixes dry out. You do have to water more frequently. You want to water occasionally until the water goes all the way to the holes at the bottom and flow. Like once a month maybe, flow out the bottom. If you've ever seen the white crust on the top of your container, that's because it builds up. Your solids from your water supply build up and you see a white crust. And so once a month or so, you want to flush it down. That also helps to bring nutrients down and air. Believe it or not, roots need air as well as water. You want to fertilize with a slow release fertilizer initially and regularly throughout the season. The plant depends on you for everything because it's in potting mix. Now the good thing about potting mix is you don't have any weeds or diseases, you know, when you buy brand new potting mix. We do not recommend gravel in the bottom of the container. It doesn't help with drainage. It just decreases the amount of soil. So you want the most amount of soil. Watch for soil separation at this crack around between the soil and the container. If you have a crack and you put your irrigation here, that flows right down the side and out the holes. If that sounds like the voice of experience, it is. These are the vegetables you can put in containers. This is the A&M site I referred to. For instance, tomatoes. If you look at tomatoes down here, 5 gallons. Whoo, that's a lot less than mine. What are they planting in there? Pixie, Tiny Tim, Toy Boy, Tumbling Tom, and Small Fry. Small tomatoes, okay? You can put small tomatoes in a 5 gallon bucket with holes in it. I believe in mulch. I think most master gardeners believe in mulch. You want to put your mulch on before the end of April because right now your soil is warming up. But by the end of April, we want to keep it cool. So mulch moderates the soil temperature. It conserves moisture. It reduces soil compaction. So that's why when I walk on my garden, it's not quite as bad. It reduces the splash. The diseases come from the soil into the garden, into the leaves, if you spray or if it rains. As it's surprising to me how high rain splashes back up, but it does, and so it reduces by mulching. You get less disease problem because the splashback is less from the mulch. It reduces fruit rot if you keep your fruit up off the soil. You want at least a 3 or 4 inch mulch layer
to prevent weeds. If you notice, I don't have any weeds. Why? Because I'm out there every day, and so I never let my garden go to weeds. Never let it go to weeds. You don't want the mulch to touch the leaves or the stem. So you pull it away from the leaves and the stem, cut off the leaves. For tomatoes, pepper, and eggplant, as you see with squash, it touches everything. It's on the ground. It's a vine. Mulch plants actually, scientifically, have larger root systems than unmulched plants. References below, okay? Wood mulch, okay. If you have wood mulch, which is what I use, the wood, the microbes in the soil use nitrogen in order to decompose the wood chips into compost, okay? Well, your plants want that nitrogen and the microbes want the nitrogen. So wood chips.
Now we're going to talk about garden problems.
Sorry, I wasn't even touching it. So it's haunted. So if you use wood chip, or if you use wood mulch, I put down nitrogen before I put the wood mulch down. So I got an extra quantity of nitrogen down, and I don't deplete the nitrogen in my soil. You can also use pine straw mulch. We'll be using pine straw mulch in our gardens here toward the end of the month, I guess. Summer pest control. You may have pests, or you will have pests coming up. Again, these were recorded in April.
Now we're going to talk about garden problems. It's May, and you probably have problems with your vegetables. One of the problems you're probably going to see is holes in the leaves. Those are often caused by worms or caterpillars. And if you see holes in the leaf, what you want to do is look underneath the leaf for a worm. Sometimes they're very tiny. They can be the size of a pencil lead. And the other thing you look for is if you see black dots on the leaf, look up, because that could be worm poop from above. If you have worms, you spray BT. We'll talk about that more later. The other thing you might see is stippling. Stippling is little dots on the leaf, and that's caused by spider mites. Spider mites love dry, hot conditions. So you look for the bottom of the leaf, and you won't see anything because they're so tiny. What you do is you tap the leaf onto a sheet of paper, and if you see any dots moving, you smear them, and if it smears green, that's chlorophyll. That's what they were sucking out of your leaf. The other thing you might see is leaf-footed bug nymphs. There will be many, many of them. And if you see those, the easiest thing to do is to crush them if the leaf is expendable, or you take a cup of soapy water and you knock them off into the cup of soapy water. So for both spider mites and for aphids, now aphids, you can tell an aphid if you look at it by under a little bit of magnification, because it has twin tailpipes out the back. And if you see that, you know it's an aphid. They'll normally be in a cluster. Most things, when you have aphids, you basically upspray. So you upspray for aphids, you upspray for spider mites. If you're on okra, the aphids will be in the flower, and they will be very dense in the flower. You use a strong jet of water for okra. But under most things, you will just simply spray like this, pretty high. Make sure you get the bottom of the leaf, because that's where the spider mites and the aphids will be.
So,
like I said, rip out old plants. Don't leave it matter. They're growing diseases and insects. For caterpillars, they can be any color. They can be any size. They can be pencil lead size. But they blend in. Usually they're under the leaf. And if you see a worm, caterpillar, we spray BT. If you ask for BT, you'll probably get, for caterpillars, you'll get the right stuff. It's actually called Bacillus thuringiensis kerstaki. But most people at the stores don't know the word kerstaki. Anyway, BTK. Leaf-footed bugs are in, the nymphs are always gathered together. That's one of my peppers, actually. They're called leaf-footed because they develop a leaf at the adult stage. And you want to kill them when they're small because these are really hard to kill. Stippling, this is what stippling looks like. It's like little tiny dots on your leaf, and that's caused by spider mites. Aphids, this is the twin tailpipes. You see the twin tailpipes sticking out here, and you'll usually see a bunch of them. Ants farm aphids for honeydew, which is a sugary substance that they create, and then that turns to black sooty mold, which is, we usually get at the hotline, oh, I got this black stuff on my plant. Well, it started out with aphids to honeydew to ants. So you got to cure the ant problem because the ants are taking care of these honeydew producing aphids or other insects that also produce honeydew. So you can upspray for aphids and spider mites. Then you might need to use insecticidal soap. You can use Dial if you're non-organic, or you can use insecticidal soap if you got the money. That usually will take care of it. Particularly, I like upspraying. It's cheap. It's nice and cool in the summer, so I don't mind it at all. For tomatoes, cucumbers, okra in particular, you look at the roots for nematode galls. If you have nematode galls, then contact us at the hotline. That's going to take some special things. Birds. As you can see in my garden, if a bird sees a ripe tomato, he can see it from a half a mile away. So I have to protect my tomatoes from the birds. I do that with nets. These are bird nets. You can get them at any big box store. They're not very expensive. You can see through them. You can upspray through them. They're nice from that regard. I also use mosquito nets. Mosquito nets are nice because the insects can't get into them. You can still upspray, but not quite as good as you can with the bird nets. If you have tomatoes, I don't really recommend planting tomatoes now. It's a little late. But if you do, plant a 60-day tomato and a hybrid and maybe a cherry tomato. You want to cage them or trellis them, keep them off the soil. Apply fertilizer at the drip line. The drip line is basically the outermost edge of the foliage. After the fruit sets, and every week until mid-June, you can use your fertilizer of choice, chemical, organic, whatever, but you want to pump that nitrogen to them. The more nitrogen they get, the more tomatoes you'll get. Cut off any leaves which are within 6 inches of the soil. You see, my leaves don't touch the ground. Mulch 3 inches deep before the end of April. Spray BTK at the first sign of caterpillars, and then probably every week thereafter, or 10 days, week or 10 days, we just go out and look for them. When we see poop or holes, I start spraying. Use a fungicide if the disease symptoms appear, or if you had a history of disease. Pick your large tomatoes when they're just starting to turn pink. At the breaker stage, when they break color from green to pink, you can pick them
You put them on the shelf, not in the refrigerator, and they will ripen. And they will taste just as good as if you'd have let them stay on the vine and for the insects and the diseases to get to them. So that is really something I do. I usually pick them right between these two stages here, and they ripen perfectly. Not true with cherry tomatoes. Cherries and grapes and small tomatoes, they stay green on the inside, leave them on the vine. Birds get to them, a few of them, that's okay. These are my garden pictures now. I got a lot of tomatoes coming onto a Carmelo. I got a few on the Sweet 100. I have tomatoes both in the ground and in containers now. One of the problems with watering is if you water from above, say with a sprinkler or with your garden hose, and you spray the foliage, if it stays wet, that encourages both fungus and bacterial diseases. So we like drip irrigation. This is shows drip irrigation here, and you can see how this takes much longer than with the sprinkler nozzles that you would use in your lawn or your turf. So this may take an hour to water with drip irrigation, whereas your overhead watering might be on for 10 minutes. So you can't put those on the same zone with your lawn. You need to have these on a separate zone because it's going to be much longer. I have this zone is connected to a manifold. These manifolds go to the drip irrigation with emitters. In my containers, I use blank hose and to get to the container so I don't have water wasted trying to get the hose from the manifold to the containers. Be careful that when you buy it, if you buy blank hose, it does not have emitters. If you buy emitter hose, you will get water. So you don't want to get the wrong hose mixed up. With permanent installations, you've seen this. This has emitters about every foot, and this is what you use in a permanent installation. It's what I have in my flower beds. But it's not as easily reconfigurable. If you have a garden rotation, basically it's going to change every year. So this doesn't make a lot of sense for me in my garden. So you can put your drip irrigation on a faucet. Just need a splitter if you still want access to a faucet, a filter, timer, pressure regulator. The drip irrigation fittings are not made for the high pressure coming out of a hose. They're made for 25 to 30 psi, and they will blow off. That sounds like experience? Yes, it is. If you try to use city water pressure. So the pressure reducer is required. It does make noise. When you put it on, it can make a humming noise that you can hear in the house sometimes. So we like drip irrigation because it's efficient, less runoff, does control the evaporation. You put the water where it's needed, and we don't have wet foliage, which encourages disease. If you're going to spray the foliage, spray it in the morning. Don't spray it at night. Leave it wet all night long, because you'll get disease from that. This reduces weeds because you're not watering the weeds, you're only watering the plants. And remember that emitters is what you want. It's also called drip tape. And when you put it down, observe it before you cover it with mulch, because you don't want to find out that there's a hole, a big slit in your watering after you've covered it with mulch. Don't bury the drip tape in soil. You can cover it with mulch, don't bury it in soil. Okay, now we're going to talk about crop rotation. Whatever you do, please don't plant the tomato in the same place every year, because the diseases and insects that like tomatoes
wake up in the spring and they say, oh, that was nice of you to provide breakfast for me. I just woke up from a long winter's nap and I'm here right where your tomato is. Move your crops. So please don't plant the same thing in the same place every year. You want to rotate based on plant family. Well, you control the plant family by what you like to eat. We all kind of like nightshade family, tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, eggplants, and the gourd family, cucumbers, melon, pumpkin, squash. So you can have a rotation based on what you like to eat, your favorite foods. Don't ever let your garden go to weeds. Either have it in fallow, which means mulch on top, have it mulched, thick mulch. Use cover crops, which you'll find out next, or cardboard. I don't care. You can use cardboard if you don't have time to plant anything.
First video here is on small space and garden rotation. This is one of my 3 gardens. It's about 50 square feet. It's what I call the terrace garden. I'm growing tomatoes on this garden, and you can see I have a multiplying onion border around. Use the multiplying onions because it provides a scent that most vermin and insects don't like. So, and it also gives me a constant supply of green onions. This is my second garden plot. This is 50 square feet, about 5 feet this way by 10 feet across. It's not the right form factor because I have to walk on my garden. If you have a 4 foot by 8 foot, you can reach it from both sides. You never have to walk on it. I have to walk on it, but the mulch helps that. I use containers here in order to be able to have a crop on my garden when it's supposed to be fallow. Fallow means you're not growing anything. I'm not growing anything in this soil, so the soil has time to rest. It's not growing weeds, it's not growing insects. The soil food web is reestablishing itself, and so hopefully next year when I put my tomatoes in here, why they will come back with a very big harvest. If you notice, you can see that none of the leaves are touching the soil. You don't want them to touch the soil because if they do, the diseases, fungus in particular, and insects can make a straight pathway right into the foliage. My third garden is here, and you can see there are irrigation hoses here that are set up to do drip irrigation. In this garden, we have peppers, we have eggplant, squash, cucumbers, Swiss chard, and okra. The okra is a seed that you see here that hasn't sprouted yet. I just planted it.
Now we'll talk a bit about cover crops. Okay, because we don't want to ever let it go to weeds. If you plant a legume, legumes are special. They make nitrogen. Cowpeas are an example of a legume. You saw about that earlier. You can catch and cycle nutrients with grasses such as cereal rye, which is what I use in the winter. I plant cereal rye in October. You can use many different species to smother weeds. They also help to loosen compacted soil, and they give you free organic matter. So you can't believe the amount of organic matter I can get from ryegrass or buckwheat. They help to maintain beneficial organisms in the off season. So between your other crops, they act as a bridge, biological bridge, to keep your good stuff going. And a lot of them don't have problems. They don't have, diseases and insects and stuff like, because they don't produce a something you're going to eat. They don't produce tomatoes. They don't produce things. They're just there as a cover crop. They reduce water use and erosion. Evaporation's drastically reduced, and water storage is increased. In particular, I use Elbon rye, planted in October. I mow it, mainly for aesthetics, and then about a month before I plant, I mow it to the ground. And because it is allelopathic, it actually can kill your garden vegetables. So you got to make sure you cut it down at least a month before you're going to plant something in the ground. And as you see, we get a lot of biomass and organic matter from Elbon rye. Buckwheat, you have never seen so many bees as if you plant buckwheat. They love buckwheat. They're all over the place. And the good thing is, they typically don't sting you. I've been up close and personal with the bees in buckwheat, and they've never stung me because they're looking for nectar and pollen. They're not looking for protect their hive. It's a great summer cover crop. I use this following tomatoes. So I plant tomatoes, rip out the tomatoes, plant buckwheat. It's one of the few things that grows here in the summertime and loves it. It actually does help with phosphorus availability and gets to be about 2 to 3 feet high, and it has very vigorous root system. Now we'll talk about succession planting. We have a video on this, and it means basically planting 2 things in series. Sweet corn followed by melon, or purple whole peas, or okra, sweet potato. This was Boone did this in July of 2020.
I'm over here, I'm looking at another succession idea. There's 3 big rows out here in Ken's garden, and all this in spring was planted with sweet corn. 3 rows, 2 double rows on each one here of sweet corn. And instead of ripping that up and cultivating the soil through there between growing seasons, just started planting for the summer right in that. Just chopping off the base of the plant and seeding right into those beds without disturbing the soil. Over here in this one, we've got some small melons. In this one here, we've got some cow peas, southern pea, or black eye peas. In this variety, purple hull peas, which this one right here is going to be one of my favorites for this time of year because it's going to grow thick, it's going to vine out, you're going to get a dense cover in this bed, which is going to keep the soil cool through the heat of the summertime. And it's really more of a good cover crop for us. Of course, it's a legume, so we're getting a little bit of nitrogen fixation in there naturally, adding organic matter, but just keeping that soil shaded, keeping the moisture intact, keeping the sun from hitting on top of that directly is worth just having some green here. But also, we get to harvest some southern peas off of that and have a good couple nests of black eyed peas over the summertime. So, great idea. This bed here as well, we've got some young okra plants growing in this. But I'd like to show you real quick just what we're talking about. You can see the old corn stalks here that he just lined to use as a mulch along the sides of the bed. But we also have the plants here that were just cut off at ground level and just left in the ground. And then planted and right down the middle in between those 2 rows, a nice healthy stand of okra that's just starting to put on some young pods inside of here. Further than that, and looking at the next step of succession, we've got some sweet potato slips that he's planted along the side here. So even as these okra plants start to grow up tall, which they will, we're going to get some ground cover underneath this with the sweet potatoes that's going to shade the soil. And then we're going to come out here in fall, and then we're going to pull up those sweet potatoes around winter, the first winter kill, the first frost that we get. Pretty cool.
Books. If you want reference books, this is my library, but these are the 2 books I use the most. Common Sense Vegetable Garden is you can't get it new. You can only get it used. It's like $10. So if you can't afford that, well, Anyway, this book here is Bob Randall's Year Round. It's a very good book. It's a great reference book. It's like $70. So those are my two I recommend. If you're into tomatoes, I like the Texas Tomato Lovers Handbook by Bill Adams also. Hotline, I mentioned that, or the helpline, whatever you want to call it. We are there every weekday from 9 till noon. You can call us. It helps if we have pictures. So if you attach pictures to an email, send them to us, we'll give you a response back. We have a different crew every day. So some of us are more experts in vegetable gardening, others in trees or so forth. Future Grow Your Own. The next one's on setting up a raised bed. How do you build a raised bed? What do you put into it? Cool season vegetables, I recommend that one if you're gonna do fall garden for broccoli and stuff like that. And then composting. I do composting. I haven't thrown any veggies out in a few years. I compost all the veggies from the leftovers. We also have a series called Landscape Success. It's virtual, 2 to 3:30 on Fridays, on flowering, irrigation, weeds, trees, fall planting, and then freeze protection. You do have to register a couple days in advance. Now, we're going to switch bases. Peg is going to talk about the demonstration garden, and we'll all meet you over there at the demonstration gardens. If you have a few questions after Peg's done, then I'll take a few questions after Peg is finished. Thank you all for your attention.
Well, thanks, Larry. Was there a slide before this one? I thought it looked different before. What you see up here is an aerial photo. It's kind of sideways, but I'm sure you can imagine it, of our vegetable garden, which we hope when you finish up here, you'll come on over, and Master Gardeners will be there to help interpret what we're doing and answer any more questions that you have that you don't get answered here. One of several demonstration gardens we have on the property, and if you have the time and the inclination, you can hang around and see the others as well. But we've got, it's planted out for the warm season crops. We've got all kinds of things growing, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and more. We have a structure there from which we harvest rainwater, and you can see the statistics on this slide. We have over a 1,600 gallon capacity in our rain barrels, and we're irrigating the vegetable garden with rainwater, which we're very proud of. We're reducing our reliance on city water. We supplement with city water when the rains, don't keep up with us, but we're quite proud of this, and we hope you'll come over and visit us. Right next to this vegetable garden with raised beds in it, there's an herb garden, and we have people in the herb garden today, and we'll chat with you about herbs and anything else that you'd like. So I'll be there and hope you come over.
Okay.